The sun beat down on the town square of Willow Creek, Texas, as I stood frozen in place, my suitcase still in the trunk of my car just a block away. I had been moments away from driving out of this place for good, leaving behind the whispers, the prayers, and the suffocating expectations that had been crushing me for months. But there she was, Aspen, standing on the old wooden platform in the center of the square where the annual Harvest Festival was in full swing. Her voice ringing out clear and bold over the crowd of hundreds. "Alora Thompson is my wife," she declared, her eyes locking onto mine with a mix of defiance and desperation that hit me like a freight train. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Faces turned from polite smiles to open shock. My parents, standing near the church steps with Pastor Reynolds, looked as if someone had struck them. Dad's hand tightened on Mom's shoulder. I felt the ground tilt beneath my boots. This was it. The secret I had guarded for 2 years, the one I thought I could bury by running away, was now echoing off the brick storefronts and the white steeple of First Baptist. I wanted to vanish. My legs wouldn't move. Aspen jumped down from the platform, pushing through the sea of flannel shirts and Sunday dresses, her dark hair catching the light. She reached me in seconds, her fingers brushing my wrist. "Alora, I couldn't let you leave like that," she whispered, voice cracking just enough for only me to hear. "Not without them knowing who we really are." The murmurs grew louder. "Did she say wife?" someone behind me asked. A woman I had known since kindergarten clutched her Bible closer. I saw my little brother, only 14, staring at me like I was a stranger. My chest tightened until breathing hurt. I had spent the last month convincing myself that disappearing quietly was the kindest thing I could do for everyone. For my family, for the church, for Aspen too. I thought distance would let them keep their world intact while I figured out how to live in mine. Now that world was shattered in one sentence. Aspen's hand stayed on my wrist, warm and steady, the only anchor in the chaos. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear she was trying to hide behind that brave chin lift. She had always been the stronger one, the one who believed love was worth the risk. I had been the one praying every night that God would change me, or at least make the feelings go away. Pastor Reynolds stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "Folks, let's give the family some space." But the damage was done. My mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Dad just stared at the ground, jaw clenched the way he did when he was trying not to yell. I knew that look. It was the same one he wore the day I told them I wasn't interested in dating the deacon's son. I pulled Aspen away from the square, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. We didn't speak until we reached the edge of the park, out of sight of most of the crowd. "Why?" I finally managed, voice hoarse. "I was leaving to protect us, to protect you from this." Aspen's brown eyes searched mine. "Protect me? Alora, hiding is what's been killing us. I love you. I'm tired of pretending I don't." Her words landed like stones in still water. I had loved her since the night 2 years ago when we sat on the hood of her old pickup talking about everything and nothing until sunrise. She had moved back to Willow Creek after college in Austin, bringing city confidence with her. I was the good church girl who had never questioned the sermons until her smile made the verses feel suddenly complicated. We kept it quiet at first, stolen moments after youth group, late-night drives where we held hands but never said the word lesbian out loud. But love doesn't stay hidden forever. The guilt grew until it choked me. Every Sunday sermon about sin and repentance felt aimed straight at my chest. I started skipping small group. Mom noticed. She started leaving devotionals on my pillow with verses highlighted in yellow. Dad invited the youth pastor over for dinner just to chat. The pressure became a constant hum under my skin. That morning I had packed the car while they were at early service. My note was simple. "I need time to think. I love you." I thought slipping away would let them mourn a daughter who simply moved away instead of one who had chosen what they believed was wrong. Aspen's public stand had taken that option away. We stood under the oak tree at the park's edge, the festival music faint in the distance. "They're going to hate me," I said quietly. "They might," she answered, honest as always. "But I couldn't watch you run from the best part of yourself. From us." I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But another part, the part that had cried alone in my room for months, felt something dangerously close to relief. The truth was out. No more hiding. The relief terrified me more than the stairs ever could. My phone buzzed. Mom's text. Come home. We need to talk. 3 simple words that carried the weight of every prayer circle I had ever sat through. Aspen saw the screen. You don't have to go alone. But I did. Some battles you still fight inside your childhood home. Even when the whole town already knows the truth. I squeezed her hand once, then let go. I'll call you later. Walking back through the square felt like walking a gauntlet. Whispers followed me like shadows. Mrs. Henderson from the library gave me a sad, disappointed smile. The deacon's wife crossed to the other side of the street. By the time I reached my parents' white clapboard house on Maple Street, my legs were shaking. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red but dry. Your father's in the living room. The house smelled like Sunday pot roast and the lavender candle she always burned after church. Everything normal except the way Dad wouldn't meet my eyes when I stepped inside. He sat in his recliner, hands folded like he was praying. Alora, he started, voice rough. We love you. You know that. I nodded, throat tight. But this, he gestured helplessly. This isn't God's plan for you. For any of us. Mom sat beside him, taking his hand. We've been talking to Pastor Reynolds. There are programs, counseling that helps people like people struggling with these feelings. We can get through this as a family. I looked at the cross on the wall, the family Bible open on the coffee table, the framed photo of my baptism when I was 12. Every object in the room felt like an accusation. I wanted to scream that I had tried praying it away, reading the verses, serving in every ministry they asked. Instead I said the only truth I had left. I love her, Mom. Aspen. And I don't think God made a mistake when he made me this way. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Mom's lip trembled. Dad closed his eyes like he was in physical pain. In that moment I understood something I had been running from for years. Love could be the most honest thing in your life and still break the hearts of the people who raised you. I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of hushed phone calls and closed doors. My parents didn't kick me out. They were too kind for that. But the house felt smaller, every room crowded with things left unsaid. Mom cooked my favorite meals like feeding me could fix what her faith told her was broken. Dad spent extra time in the garage. The wine of the table saw drowning out whatever he couldn't bring himself to say. Aspen texted every few hours, short messages that said everything without saying much. I'm here when you're ready. Miss your laugh. The town is buzzing but I don't care. I read them in the dark of my childhood bedroom. The same room where I once taped Bible verses to the mirror to remind myself who I was supposed to be. On Tuesday evening Pastor Reynolds came over after dinner. He sat in the same chair he'd sat in for my confirmation class 10 years earlier. His voice was gentle, the way it always was when he talked about grace. Alora, same-sex attraction is a heavy cross to bear. But God doesn't give us more than we can handle. With prayer and accountability, many have found freedom. I listened to him explain how my feelings were the result of a fallen world. How true love looked like obedience. Part of me still wanted to believe him. That part had been raised on every sermon, every youth camp altar call. But another part, the part that remembered the way Aspen's hand fit perfectly in mine, whispered that maybe freedom looked different than what they described. When he left, Mom hugged me tight. We're not giving up on you, sweetheart. Her voice cracked on the last word. I hugged her back because I loved her more than almost anything. But I felt the fracture widening between us. That night I drove to the old quarry where Aspen and I used to meet. She was already there, sitting on the tailgate of her truck, 2 cans of sweet tea waiting. The stars were sharp above the limestone walls. I'm sorry I blindsided you, she said the moment I got out. But I'm not sorry I said it. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching. They want me to go to counseling. Real counseling, not the kind that affirms anything. Aspen was quiet for a long moment. And what do you want? The question hurt because I didn't have a clean answer. I wanted her. I wanted my family's pride. I wanted the version of God I grew up with to stop feeling like he was disappointed in me every second of every day. I want to stop feeling like I'm choosing between the 2 most important things in my life, I whispered. She turned to face me, the moonlight catching the determined line of her jaw. You're not choosing between me and them, Alora. You're choosing between hiding and living. They can still love you even if they don't understand. But you can't keep carving pieces of yourself off to make them comfortable. Her words echoed the ones I had been too afraid to say to myself. We sat in silence after that, hands linked, the night air cool on our skin. For the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. The next morning I told my parents I wasn't going to the counseling program. Mom cried quietly at the kitchen table. Dad stared out the window at the pecan tree he had planted when I was born. We raised you better than this, he said finally, voice low. I know you think that, I answered. But I'm 28 years old. This is who I am. The conversation ended there, but the silence that followed lasted for days. Aspen and I started seeing each other openly. Coffee at the diner where people stared. Walks around the square where conversations stopped when we passed. Some people were kind. Old Mrs. Alvarez from the bakery slipped me an extra cookie and whispered, "Love is love, Mija." Others weren't. The youth pastor's wife unfollowed me on social media. My cousin texted that she was praying for my soul. Each small rejection chipped away at the armor I had built. But Aspen was there through all of it. She listened when I raged about the church. She held me when I cried about my parents. She reminded me I was still the same person who volunteered at the food bank and sang in the choir for 15 years. One Saturday we drove 2 hours to Austin just to walk hand in hand without looking over our shoulders. We sat on a bench in Zilker Park watching dogs chase frisbees and kids play in the fountain. For a few hours it felt possible to have both, my faith and my love, without one destroying the other. On the drive home the doubts crept back in. Willow Creek wasn't Austin. The town had 1 stoplight and 3 churches. Everyone knew everyone. My parents' friends were their whole world. I started wondering if staying was selfish. If leaving really was the kinder choice after all. Aspen must have felt the shift in me. When we pulled into her driveway she turned off the engine but didn't get out. "You're pulling away again." "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared of what this is costing them." "Costing you." She reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "The only thing it's costing me is pretending. I'd rather lose the whole town than lose you one more time." Her certainty was both beautiful and terrifying. I kissed her then, soft and slow under the porch light, the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. But even as I pulled her closer, the weight of my family's pain pressed against my ribs like a stone. The first real explosion came on a Wednesday night. I had agreed to attend the midweek Bible study, because Mom asked with that quiet hope in her voice that always undid me. I thought if I showed up, maybe they would see I wasn't turning my back on God, just on the version of me they wanted. The topic was God's design for family. I sat in the back row next to Aspen, our knees touching under the folding chairs. Pastor Reynolds read from Genesis, his voice warm and familiar. When he opened the floor for discussion, Mr. Caldwell, the same man who coached my softball team in middle school, looked straight at us. "Seems like some folks in this room are confused about that design lately," he said. The room went still. Aspen's hand found mine. I felt every eye turn our direction. I stood up before I could think better of it. "With all due respect, sir, I believe God's design includes love. Real love. The kind that makes you want to be better, kinder, more honest." Murmurs rippled. Someone gasped. Mom's face went pale across the room. Pastor Reynolds stepped in smoothly. "Alora, we all struggle with different sins. The important thing is repentance." Am I sinning by loving someone? My voice shook but didn't break. Because if love is the greatest commandment, then maybe we're all reading the same book differently. The debate that followed lasted 40 minutes. Voices rose and fell. Some quoted Leviticus. Others spoke about grace and the woman at the well. Aspen stayed quiet beside me, letting me fight this one alone because she knew I needed to. When it was over, half the room wouldn't meet my eyes. The other half looked thoughtful, even conflicted. Mom didn't speak to me the whole drive home. When we pulled into the driveway she finally said, "You embarrassed your father in front of the whole congregation." "I told the truth," I answered. "Truth without love isn't God's truth," she whispered, and the door closed softly behind her. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. Aspen's words from earlier echoed. No one was completely right or completely wrong. My parents believed they were protecting my soul. I believed I was finally honoring it. Both convictions came from love. Both caused pain. The next morning Dad asked me to meet him at the hardware store he owned on Main Street. He didn't yell. He just handed me a set of new keys to the storage shed and said, "Your mother and I think you should move your things out by the end of the month. Not because we don't love you. Because we can't keep pretending this is okay." The words landed like a quiet hammer. I nodded because I had expected them eventually. When I told Aspen later, she cried with me, then held me until the shaking stopped. We found a tiny apartment above the bakery. Mrs. Alvarez offered it at a discount for the brave ones. Moving day was quiet. My brother helped carry boxes without saying much. Mom packed my childhood quilt and pressed it into my hands like a white flag. "I'll always pray for you," she said at the door. "Every single night." "I know," I answered. "I'll pray for us too." The apartment smelled like fresh bread and possibility. Aspen helped me arrange furniture, her laughter filling the small rooms. For the first time I felt like I was building something instead of running from it. But every night when the bakery closed and the street grew quiet, the guilt returned. I started attending a different church 2 towns over, smaller, quieter, where no one knew my story yet. I still prayed. I still read my Bible. I just couldn't sit in the same pew where I had once taken communion beside my parents. Aspen never pushed me to stop believing. She came with me to the new church sometimes, sitting beside me without comment. She even joined the volunteer committee that delivered meals to shut-ins. Watching her laugh with the elderly ladies made my heart swell until it hurt. Yet the tension between my old life and new one kept building. My cousin's wedding invitation arrived with a handwritten note. "We'd love to see you, but maybe without your friend. For the family's sake." I cried in the shower so Aspen wouldn't hear. One evening Aspen found me on the fire escape staring at the stars. She sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder. "You're grieving," she said softly. "That's okay. Grieving doesn't mean you're wrong." I leaned into her. "I just wish they could see that I'm still their daughter. Still the same person who used to sing them to sleep when they were sick." "They might one day," she answered. "Or they might not. Either way, you don't have to carry their disapproval like a life sentence." Her words were simple, but they cracked something open inside me. For the first time I considered the possibility that accepting their inability to accept me was part of loving them too. The town's annual Thanksgiving potluck at the community center was supposed to be neutral ground. Everyone brought a dish. No sermons, just food and football on the big screen. Aspen and I decided to go together. Our first public holiday as an open couple. We brought 2 pies. 1 apple, 1 pecan. Mrs. Alvarez winked when we walked in. A few people nodded politely. But the moment we set the pies on the dessert table, the energy shifted. My parents were already there, helping at the drink station. Mom's smile faltered when she saw us. Dad's shoulders stiffened. I approached them anyway. "Hi," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "Happy Thanksgiving." Mom hugged me quickly, the kind of hug that lasts half a second too short. "You look well." Dad shook Aspen's hand like she was a business acquaintance. "Thank you for the pies." The conversation died there. We drifted to different tables. I watched from across the room as my brother sat between them, laughing at something Dad said. The distance felt physical, like an invisible wall I had helped build. Halfway through dinner, Pastor Reynolds stood up for the traditional blessing. He thanked God for family and faith and asked for guidance for those among us walking difficult paths. His eyes flicked toward our table. Several heads turned. Aspen reached under the table and squeezed my knee. Later, while I was refilling my tea, my mother cornered me near the kitchen. "We miss you at home," she said. "Church feels empty without your voice in the choir." "I miss you too," I answered honestly. "But I can't pretend anymore." She touched my cheek the way she had when I was small. "We're not asking you to pretend. We're asking you to consider that maybe this path isn't the one God intended." The words weren't new, but hearing them in her tired voice still stung. I wanted to tell her about the peace I felt when Aspen and I prayed together before bed. Instead, I said, I'm considering a lot of things, Mom, including the possibility that God loves me exactly like this. She didn't argue. She just nodded once and walked back to her table. That night, Aspen and I sat on our tiny couch eating leftover pie straight from the tin. Your mom looked sad, she said. She is, I answered. So am I. But sadness isn't the same as regret. Aspen rested her head on my shoulder. I never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't, I told her. I did that by refusing to choose between honesty and their approval. The weeks after Thanksgiving grew colder in every sense. My father stopped replying to my texts. My brother's basketball games came and went without me because the stands would be full of people who now whispered when I walked by. Aspen threw herself into her job at the veterinary clinic, coming home smelling like antiseptic and wet fur. I picked up extra shifts at the library to keep busy. One freezing December evening, Aspen came home early. Her face was pale. The clinic owner got a letter, she said, signed by 20 customers asking him to let me go because of moral concerns. I felt sick. Did he? No. He told them to take their business elsewhere. She tried to smile, but it wobbled. Still hurts, though. I pulled her into my arms right there in the kitchen. We stood like that for a long time, the heater humming softly. In that moment, I understood that my decision to live openly wasn't only hurting my family, it was hurting her too. The town's quiet disapproval had teeth. Christmas was the hardest. My parents invited me to dinner but added, just you. I declined politely. Aspen and I spent the day driving to San Antonio to see her aunt, who accepted us without question. We laughed, exchanged silly gifts, and went to midnight mass at a big cathedral where no one knew our names. For a few hours the weight lifted. On the drive home, Aspen said quietly, I think I'm ready to leave Willow Creek if you are. The offer hung between us like a lifeline and a loss at the same time. Leaving would mean safety. Leaving would also mean admitting that love had cost me my entire childhood world. I wasn't sure I was ready to pay that price. January brought ice storms and a new kind of pressure. The library board called me into a meeting. They were concerned about community standards and suggested I take a leave of absence. I resigned before they could ask. Aspen's boss at the clinic gave her a raise instead, but the message was clear. The town had chosen sides. I started applying for jobs in bigger cities, Dallas, Houston, even Austin. Each application felt like another nail in the coffin of the life I had known. Aspen watched me without comment, giving me space to grieve what I was about to lose. One night in late January, I packed a single suitcase again. I wrote a letter to my parents explaining that I needed distance to heal, that I loved them, that I hoped one day they could see me whole. I left it on their porch at dawn and drove to Aspen's apartment. She opened the door in her pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. You're really doing it, she said. I have to, I answered. For all of us. We spent the day planning the move. She would give notice at the clinic. I would find something, anything, in Austin. We talked about finding a church that welcomed us, about building new traditions. The future felt possible again. But that evening my brother showed up at our door, eyes red. Mom found the letter, he said. She's been crying all day. Dad won't come out of the garage. The guilt crashed over me like cold water. I followed him home. Mom met me at the door and folded me into her arms without a word. We stood there crying together for a long time. Please don't go, she whispered finally. Not like this. Not because of us. It's not because of you, I said. It's because I can't keep pretending I'm someone I'm not. And I can't keep hurting you by staying. Dad appeared in the hallway, silent. He didn't hug me. He just looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. The smallest acknowledgement I had ever received from him. It was enough. I drove back to Aspen's place feeling raw and strangely lighter. She was waiting on the porch steps. I sat beside her and told her everything. When I finished, she rested her forehead against mine. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, she said. Wife. The word still made my heart stutter. The next morning I woke up determined. I canceled the Austin applications. I told Aspen I couldn't leave, not yet. Not until I had tried one more time to show my family that my love for her didn't cancel out my love for them. She didn't argue. She just kissed me and said, "Then we stay and fight for both." The Harvest Festival returned with warmer weather, and the same wooden platform in the square. This time I wasn't planning to run. Aspen and I walked through the crowd hand in hand, heads high. Some people still looked away. Others smiled. Mrs. Alvarez gave us free churros. My brother waved from the dunk tank. My parents stood near the pie contest table. Mom saw us first. She touched Dad's arm. They didn't turn away. I walked over slowly. "Hi," I said. Mom's eyes were bright. "Your apple pie won a ribbon," she told me, pointing to the blue ribbon on the table. Dad cleared his throat. "Tastes just like your grandma's." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't full acceptance. But it was a bridge, small, shaky, but real. We stood there awkwardly until Aspen stepped forward and said, "Thank you for the recipe you gave Alora last year. It's our favorite." Mom smiled, small and tentative. "You're welcome." Later, when the music started and the square filled with dancers, Aspen pulled me onto the floor. We swayed under the string lights, her arms around my waist, my head on her shoulder. For the first time in years I felt both parts of myself, daughter and partner, believer and woman in love, existing in the same space without tearing me apart. We still argued sometimes. My parents still prayed for change. The town still whispered. But I had stopped running. Aspen had stopped hiding. And somewhere between the pain and the possibility, we had both learned that love doesn't always conquer everything, but it can teach us how to carry what it costs. I looked at Aspen under the lights, her face soft with the same peace I felt, and I knew we would keep choosing each other every single day, even when choosing meant losing something precious. But was I right to choose love when it shattered the world that raised me? True or false? Personal happiness is worth the pain we caused to those who loved us first?